welcome back to episode 3 of Chasing the Vision, the series that's in partnership with Exit Strategies and Violand Management Associates. I am joined again by the VMA GM Tim Hull and founder of Exit Strategies JT Cry. Again, in Chasing the Vision, we're talking all about what it is like to chase your vision for your business, whatever that may be, whether it's to grow it and sell it, whether it's to grow it and pass it along, whatever that may be. Both of these gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge in what it looks like to grow a successful, profitable business. So that's kind of what we're talking about. In the first 2 episodes, we really focused on people. We talked about the owners and then the leadership and management team and what that looks like when you're chasing the overall vision for a company. And now we're going to take a step back and look at the company as a whole and the importance of a company identity, kind of what that means, the professional sense that your company gives off to your community or to the industry or your partners, whatever that may be. So this is where terms like culture and professionalism kind of enter the discussion. So JT and Tim, welcome back. Thank you again for being here. Since we're on episode 3, for people who are kind of catching up, I will say I've gotten great feedback on this series so far, so I'm excited to keep this going. I know there are people that are excited to keep these episodes going, but really quick, Tim, we'll start with you. Do a very quick intro of yourself, and then JT, do that as well before we kind of really get rolling.
Yeah, thanks for having us back, Michelle. We're excited for this is episode 3 now. So I guess we did okay in episode 1 and 2, so we're going to keep it going. That's good. So Tim Hull, yeah, I'm the general manager of Violand Management Associates. So JT, go ahead.
That was nice and sweet. Thanks.
It was nice short and sweet.
Hopefully they listened to the first 2. So
there you go.
Yes.
JT here. I'm the owner of Exit Strategies, and my specialty is the valuation and sales of exceptional restoration companies nationwide. And I start with a great education so you can make great decisions for the road ahead.
Perfect. Those are perfect intros. I always like to catch people like, you never know when people are jumping into a series, right? So people could find out about the series in episode 3 and then go back and hit 1 and 2. So I like to just get a little bit of background in there. So thank you for humoring me. So Tim, let's have you kick this one off and give us an overview of what we mean when we say professional sense of a company. What does that mean?
Yeah, when I think of professional sense and how it relates to specifically contractors that are out there, Michelle, I think about kind of the general consensus that people have when they think about home improvement contractors, whether that's a restoration company or any home improvement contractor, plumber, electrician, they don't have a real good name. And you hear stories, all the time in the news about people that were taken advantage of. Somebody took the money, they did part of the work, or they took the money and didn't do any of the work, that kind of thing. And so when it comes to professional sense, the first thing that comes to my mind is really just honesty and integrity. Answering the phone, showing up when you said you're going to show up, doing the work that you're supposed to, what you would typically expect from any service provider that you would hire to do anything on your home, But I think, maybe going a little bit deeper than that, it gets into, what's your brand image look like? How do your employees dress? How do you present yourself? And then internally, how do you keep your books? Are things clean? Is business done what we refer to as above board? And instead of, hiding things or doing things that maybe aren't as kosher as you would like them to be. So to me, in a general, aspect, that's what I think of when I think of professional sense.
So Tim, really quick to follow up on that, when you're thinking about the companies that you've worked with over the years, this is the area where companies can really start differentiating themselves in their marketplace as well. This professional sense, this brand sense, their integrity, all of that. So what are some things that you've seen companies do really, really well over the years that have helped differentiate themselves from other restorers in their market?
Great question. So that, to me, we have a lot of discussion surrounding this very topic with our clients. And I'm, privy to the project management side of things a little bit more. So with the project managers that are out there kind of running these jobs that they're doing for their customers, I always tell them, look, I mean, you can hire any contractor to, pound nails and suck water and do all those things. And at the end of the day, you're going to get the same product, maybe with a little bit differing degree of craftsmanship, but the true differentiator for any contractor is really the way you deliver it. And it starts with the very first phone call. It starts with the impressions. It starts with the documentation, the communication, the scheduling, the list just kind of goes on and on and on. So for me, the real successful companies that I've observed over the years, they create that differentiation based on the customer experience that they have, and not necessarily on the craftsmanship or the quality of the actual service that they're providing at that time.
Yes. Okay. Great answer. Okay. So JT, kind of flipping around and going from a buyer lens, somebody who's in the industry looking to buy a company, what are buyers looking at when it comes to kind of this professional sense, this sense of a clean company with a clear, good identity?
Yeah, Tim hit several of those head on, and I appreciate that. When you start talking about internal facing, not the client facing side of the business, but the internal facing, there's really one professional variable that's visible, and that's clean books. That's what we all want to see, right? Is it clean books? Well, when you get beyond that, the bucket of professionalism, it encompasses a lot, and it can be the level of employee turnover. It can be your workers' comp and litigation history. It can be the use of KPIs and clear communications, incentive programs, attitude towards safety and training. This can be conversion rates, the use of technology. There's all sorts of things. There's a dozen or two different variables that fit into this bucket of professionalism. And when it comes to cleaning up and selling a company, buyers ask those questions. They really do. They want to understand how it works internally. And whether you're ready for sale or not, just getting those items buttoned up and tightened up in general, you've got a much better company. That's one of the things that Violand specializes in.
Mm-hmm. JT, on the tail end of that too. So that's good from a metric standpoint. Do you feel that people also maybe take a look at the company that they keep, I guess, for lack of better words, who are they doing business with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I assume that question was for me. Absolutely. It's the dependency on the quality of consultants, your quality of CPA, the quality of legal advice you're getting, some peer groups that are out there. It's business doesn't happen in a vacuum. And there's so much information out there right now, and the industry has come such a long way the last 10, 15 years with software and job costing and job tracking and all the things that we want to see now to run a nice tight company. I think gone are the days, and I think that's why some of the people who are 60, 65 and up have struggled, because they'll call and say, I don't recognize the industry anymore. It's not the industry I started in. And it's not wrong, it's just different. But it's come so far, and you've got to sort of grab onto technology now and let it make your job more efficient. Or I hate to say it, but you're going to be left behind. That might be a harsh statement, but I think it's true.
No, it's definitely true. So JT, I want to go back to the comment you made really quick about clean books. And that does play a big role in the professional sense that a company gives, especially to a potential buyer. Are there early indicators that you see when just glancing at books, even, that are like a hint of like, maybe there's something here that might not be quite, you don't have to like go deep into the weeds here, but something like right surface level that a quick glance at the books things might give away, ooh, the professionalism here might be a little off?
Well, it's tough to gauge professionalism by the cleanliness of books, but anyone who's doing just kitchen table accounting you're not starting with a very good foundation right there. I sold the business last fall in August, and I initially told him he wasn't sellable, and this was over 20 million, and essentially fired him, saying no buyer is going to get their arms around your business, and their lender, no one's going to take a look at it. Well, he thought I was full of hot air, and I said, please go ask a few questions, but you need to get it cleaned up. You need to organize your chart of accounts, etc. And he called me back several months later and said, well, you were right. I asked, who was that referral again for the QuickBooks specialist? And we got him cleaned up and sold. So initially, just a nice clean chart of accounts that gives you the information, gives the owner the information that they want, because it's all about data in. Once it's in, now we can worry about pulling it out. But consistency is one of the hardest things to get. You look at a history on a P&L, and you look at gross profit, let's say, and let's say it's, and don't quote me on the percentages, because some gross profits are 50, some are 70, some are 35. It all depends on who puts what into gross profit. But let's say you're at 60 65, 63, 61. Well, that's not terrible. When you look at a gross profit that's 60, 50, 78, 42, and it's bouncing. Well, are there cat events? Are there large losses? Were there commissions paid? What is driving that inconsistency? And every set of numbers tells a story. And as an owner, you've got to understand that story. If you don't, we're in a world of trouble right there. If you don't understand what the numbers are telling us, it's not a good start.
That's
Yeah.
interesting you bring that up, JT, because I just learned recently that the variation or fluctuation in a gross profit is actually one of the largest triggers for an audit too. So
It is.
you're not thinking of selling your business, that there's a reason why you should be consistent with your bookkeeping.
Perfect. We could do a whole episode on bookkeeping alone, actually. If we're talking about chasing the vision, we could do a whole one on finances alone, easily. So, okay. So moving forward a little bit with the conversation. So, Tim, I'm sure that a lot of the companies that come to Violand kind of, some of them are coming because things are going really well and they want to keep shooting for the stars, but others are probably coming to you going, help, we need help. We have skeletons in our closet that need to be cleaned out. We don't know what we're doing. Our margins are terrible. We have terrible turnover, all of these things. So where do you start with companies? This is kind of perfect timing that this episode's coming out as spring cleaning time. So what do you kind of walk companies through? This is a huge question. I know you could not possibly answer it all in one quick question here, but where do you even start with spring cleaning of a company to get them back up to a good professional outward facing space?
Yeah. I mean, I personally prefer the growth engagements over problem solving any day of the week, right? But
yeah.
But I think the consistent theme is that everybody's got things that they need to work on in their business or should be working on in their business. And maybe they may not call them problems at the time, but some of these things are good problems that you want to look at. And there's definitely, there's times where we get people that call and say, hey, I really need to get things cleaned up. Oftentimes it's too late. They call us when a buyer that's at the doorstep and they say, all right, they're going to come in and look at my house, and how can I clean the house up so it looks better on short notice? So I would encourage people to not look at it as a spring cleaning thing, but maybe look at it as more of a maintenance item that you should be looking at all the time, because I mean, you never know when somebody's going to walk by with a check that's large enough to change your opinion about selling your business. But the first thing that comes to mind is red flags. And JT, you probably see this all the time, where you think you got a good deal on the table, and then all of a sudden there's a skeleton in the closet. There's a lawsuit hanging out there. There is some sort of financial impropriety. There's something, an employment law complaint, anything that is going to maybe make that deal go south when it gets into due diligence. Those things need to be dealt with, and dealt with swiftly. If you've got aging receivables that are out there because of a customer complaint or an ongoing issue, you've got contractor labor board, a complaint against you, you've got a lawsuit, get those things out of the way. The biggest mistake I think I see contractors make is they fight those types of issues based on principle. And look, I mean, I got just as deep principles as anybody else, but at the end of the day, we're all businessmen. And if it's going to cost you more to fight that thing than it is, to just buy yourself out of it or make it go away or settle, at the end of the day, when it comes to a transaction, you don't want to have any of that stuff when you go to due diligence in a deal.
Yeah, and I'll help clean it up, Tim. No buyer willingly steps into a lawsuit. So anything that's pending, it has to be settled or it doesn't close. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
JT, how often do you run into something where there's kind of an 11th hour, like, oh, that is going to affect the transaction? Hopefully not that often, but
it's more often than you think, but it's not always in a bad way either. And that's what I know what we're kind of focusing on is the bad here. And that can happen. The numbers can be coming down. There's an issue that pops up. There's an accident with an individual on the road in one of the vans. There's things that pop up. But here's an example of a good. Okay. Just sold a company in the Bay Area that just last week, Wednesday. And it was one of the cleanest companies I've ever looked at in 17 years in this space. It was very impressive. And they were growing very quickly. And because of the growth, they kept ordering vehicles. They kept ordering certain barrier systems. They picked up clients who required certain types of equipment. And we're now post LOI, and we're spending a lot of money between a letter of intent and closing. And fortunately, the buyers were fantastic to work with. And the growth issues caused a lot of discussion about who's paying for what and who's going to store what, and what was part of the deal, what wasn't part of the deal, what's paid off at closing, what isn't. And so that cuts both ways. But on the negative side, you know, Tim said it, if there's any known skeletons, they've just got to be cleaned up. And typically those are very obvious.
Mhm.
And also what most people don't realize is they will be discovered. There's no such thing as sweeping things under the rug. It just doesn't happen. And when you attempt to do that, you're almost guaranteeing a lawsuit down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of the bad stuff aside, you know, lawsuits, complaints, age receivables, all that stuff aside, there are things that come up that can be viewed as a strength of the business that actually end up being a liability at the table. And, you know, I had one that closed a couple of years ago, and we hadn't given it much consideration because we thought that it was a valuable asset. It was a contractual relationship that seller had with, you know, a vendor. And at the table, the buyer had no intention on renewing that relationship. So technically they had to buy themselves out of that contract.
Right.
And the penalty was very significant. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were at stake there, and it was a deal breaker for the seller. And fortunately, we were able to get in front of that vendor and negotiate a you know, a buyout of that agreement that was reasonable, that we could deal with. But that was almost a deal breaker, like you mentioned, at the 11th hour.
Mm-hmm.
How much so we've talked a lot about the books and lawsuits and AR, those kind of things when it comes to kind of the value and professional sense of a company. But how much does the culture and the people and the team and those kind of things play into the overall value of a company? This is, I guess, a question that I've never even thought about. How do you figure out the value of a really good team or a really good culture that trumps maybe every other company in the market? Like maybe this is a rock star culture where everybody wants to work. How do you value that above a competitor if they're both doing maybe the same amount of revenue?
JT,
Tim, do you want to lead with that?
Well, the reason I'm laughing, Michelle, is because I just spent the last 2 days with a dozen other consulting companies from all across the world, and this was one of the things that is a very new but prolific service line for consultants is post-merger acquisition integrations, engagements, and this was the biggest hurdle that all of them had. Was you can go into due diligence and you can measure and you can research and you can observe and verify all kinds of things, but you can't do it with culture. And so you've got no way, there's no real guarantee that half the employees don't leave after the acquisition unless you contractually bind them to the deal, right? So honesty and culture on behalf of both buyer and seller parties is really important when you go into that. But you know, you can look at metrics, you can look at turnover rates, you can look at online reviews, you can look at has the target company, the seller, have they won awards for the best place to work? And you know, you look for those things where they're indicators of positive culture, employee tenure. But again, there's no guarantees. Like, you know, once the sale goes through, it's probably one of the most challenging things to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah, you're spot on. It always depends on who's buying who, whether it's a true merger, whether it's one company absorbing another, et cetera. But most are standalone. The integration is oftentimes with software and policies. It isn't often with people. Culture, however, can change quickly. And it's one of the things that the areas that it shows up in is turnover, like you mentioned, Tim. So I always ask a lot of questions about, you know, let's say a company has got 6 or 8 really key members. I want to know the longevity in the industry. How many years have those years been spent at the existing company? You know, you've got let's say you've got a GM that's got 15 years of industry experience and 12 of those have been with your company. Well, that's a pretty good stat. Well, what if they've got 3 years of industry experience and 18 months have been spent at your company? Well, that's a totally different level of confidence, right? So the companies out there with with 80 to 100, 120, 140 years of experience in the industry, and 60, 80, 90 have been spent at this company, that really, in theory, and oftentimes in reality, makes the owner's job easier. The quality of life is better. There's experience there to lean into. So it really shows up in the culture, the desire to work there, the employment tracks that are built in, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So, okay. So Tim, where does mindset fit into this, and kind of what type of mindset do owners and leaders, lieutenants in companies need to have to kind of lead the charge to make sure that the company does have this professional sense, that the books are clean, there is a healthy culture, there's low turnover, all of these different check boxes that we've talked about so far? Where does the leadership, upper leadership mindset, like everything starts at the top. We've talked about this in every episode. I'm sure we will talk about it in every episode left. This all starts at the top. So what does the mindset need to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at the quality of the organization that you want to build, right? I mean, what we're talking about here is, you know, you can be a good restorer, you can be a good carpenter or painter or whatever, you know, it is that your business does technically, but looking at the quality of the organization that you're building overall, and really looking at that as a standard that you need to live up to is I think where the mindset needs to be. You know, too often people kind of engage in their day-to-day work and they go, well, you know, I build houses, I restore homes, I clean stuff, you know, and that's what I do. But there's got to be a commitment to the organization separate from the individual. And I look at I'm from Pittsburgh, right? So you know, people, you either love or hate the Steelers. But the one thing that I think everybody will agree on is the overall quality of the organization. And they talk a lot about the standard being the standard. And you know, it's work hard, you show up. The expectation at the end of the year isn't that we hope to be playing football in January or February. That's the expectation. So creating that standard that you can press down, you know, to your employees and allow them to engage in that in some way that they can observe and feel and be a part of all the time. Everything else that you have to do in business, the mechanical side of things to give you that professional sense, follows it because they know what they're striving for.
Yeah, and I'd like to say something very similar in a different language. How's that?
Yeah, great.
Because owners can do it all, and they can, right? They built the company, doesn't mean they should. And there's this misconception out there that they can do it as well or better than anybody. And so they don't. And it makes it hard to find labor, it makes it hard to delegate, etc. And if an owner can remain strategic, and what I mean by that is to focus on company problems, not, you know, project problems. And of course, things are going to float to the top all the time. They'll just find the owner's desk. But if they can remain strategic and work on company problems, company solutions, company strategies that will help get you to the next level, that's very different than most companies who might be in that 3, 4, 5 million in sales range, and the owner is both a GM and a project manager, or a GM and an estimator. There's not enough time to go around to be effective in both. You can't do it. And so you hear things like, oh, I'd love to train so-and-so, but I don't have the time. I'd love to implement this, but I don't have the time. You know, I'd love to sign up for some classes at Viola, and I don't know how I take 3 days off and do that. It's like, well, at the end of the day, you can't afford not to. You're just going to be stuck right here. So there's this instant shortage of time when you try to wear too many hats, and it's a big anchor on the company for sure.
So what advice do you two give, in kind of playing off of that, give owners who are in this space where maybe they're at 3 million and they want to get to 6, 7, 8? I know that there are these tiers in restoration where it takes like momentum to push through the next ceiling to get to the next revenue number. So how do you coach owners through, you have to start letting go? Where do they start letting go if they're struggling to let go?
Are we still talking about mindset, or are we talking about execution?
Well, it's both, right? I mean, your mindset has to change if you're going to be willing to take a step in a different direction, right? Like, my mindset isn't I'm controlling everything. My mindset is I'm bringing other smart people in with me, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, look, as an observer, I'm just going to give you what we see. You know, I
Yeah.
think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they grow their business, and they should be congratulated, they've grown their business to a point where they can't do it all. That's a great place to be. You did something right. But I think at that point they fall victim to a whole host of different things that are going on between their ears. And, you know, maybe it's that, you know, trap that nobody can do it better than me. So, you know, or there's a control issue there. You know, they need to be the one in the driver's seat all the time. And when you say let go, it's easy. Yeah, well, yeah, just hire somebody to do that. Or, you know, you can spend more time working strategically on your business. Like as a Monday morning quarterback, it's easy to say that. But when you look at day-to-day activities and you've got a customer that's screaming, you've got, you know, receivables that are aging, you're struggling to make payroll, or, you know, or feed the monster because it's growing so fast, you got to buckle down and do what needs to be done. But, you know, to your point though, JT, the time thing, I mean, that's kind of a sore spot subject with me. If I'm OCD about something, it's efficiency and time management. We've all got the same bank. It's all 24 hours.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, well, I'm too busy to do this or whatever, I really wish they would say, I just chose to do something else.
Exactly.
Look, everybody, if you don't have more things to do in the 24 hours that you have to work with, you might be doing something wrong. Right?
Mhm.
Like I've never sat down and actually, I think, been bored in my life because there's always something to do. It's just your choice as to what you choose to do. So yeah, they may not do it exactly how you want it done, Michelle.
Yep.
But there's a lot of smart people out there that are very capable, and you need to empower them to do things that will free your time up to make decisions to do strategic things in your business better.
And what happens a lot on my end, Michelle, is, and Tim, you'll appreciate this, is that people call and they're overwhelmed. They're too busy.
Mhm.
They're tired. They're probably catching a little flack at home for being gone so much. This is the industry we're in, right? It's 24/7. And they call thinking that selling is the only option. And that isn't the only option. When I take them through this analysis process and I can point out, here's where you're struggling, here's what needs to be done, there are typically no surprises in there, but there is a very direct correlation to company value as well. And so when we get through that and we review it, some days I get the deer in the headlight look, and others they'll say, or let me lead with the conversation. I'll say, listen, I don't think it's the right time to sell. If we got you down to 40 hours a week instead of 70, and you found a little joy in your business again, would you keep it? Oh yeah, that'd be great. I wouldn't sell then. Well, great. Let's start there. Let's talk to Tim at Violand and get a few answers. And if we can get you there again, let's do it. Selling is not the only option. And I never push anyone to sell. That's a whole nother conversation, but nobody's on the timing committee except the owners and maybe a spouse. But it's there's a lot of solutions besides selling when you're tired.
Yeah.
And I think that's sage advice. I mean, coming from a guy that's a broker, right?
Yep.
Do you really want to sell this thing, or is that really the only option? I think that's you got to take that for the credibleness that it is, Michelle, and being sincere, JT, right?
Mhm.
I thought that was really wise advice. I mean, there are many owners out there that are probably miserable and working way too many hours, but gosh, what if you stepped into this and realized you could actually enjoy running your company again? Have you both seen examples of that where owners think, yeah, I'm sure I'm ready to sell. I cannot do this for 1 second longer. I think the pandemic brought a lot of that out as well, where it was like, this is insane. I really don't want to do this anymore. And then there's still hope. Do you either of you have an example of that? I think owners would love to hear that there's hope. Like if they're feeling like they're at the end of their ropes and selling's the only way that they're going to get out of this, that you can turn it back.
Yeah, and look, Michelle, I think it's just a kind of reallocation of somebody's time.
Mhm.
In my observation, at least the successful business entrepreneurs and owners that are out there, if they're used to working 70 hours a week, they're still going to work 70 hours a week. It's just a matter of what they're working on. The real problems that I see are the ones that actually try to be the proverbial absentee owner. You know, I can make millions by working 4 hours a week. That doesn't work. Not for the folks that I've seen.
Yeah.
But then they get out and they go, yeah, I can only play so much golf. I can only travel so much. I can only do whatever. Now I've got to go do something.
Mhm.
And that's when you see either, issues come up personally with them or declining health issues, just a whole host of things happen. Like people are wired to work and keep their minds busy. But what we try to do, at least with our clients, is we try to refocus or reallocate their time. And you know how to run a project, you know how to be a restorer, you know how to go and sell or keep the books or whatever. But now that you've got people to do that and hopefully better than you could, why don't we come back and learn something new? Let's talk about market expansion. Let's talk about, financial investment in different vehicles, or like gain their interest in more strategic ways. And then all of a sudden they go, oh,
Mhm.
why, this is a whole different world, maybe different stresses, but it's something that I'm now engaged in because it's new, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And from 30,000 feet, Michelle, people don't even know what their options are until you educate them.
Mhm.
And so there's always dollars attached to your efforts. And when I go through the process that I do and get them educated, and I try to pull out as much emotion as possible, because it's a very emotional lane that I'm in. And once they understand their effort is tied to a certain dollar amount, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, it's a whole different level of engagement.
Mm.
Because before they're just, trying to run a good business. But when I say, listen, if you did this and you approached it this way and you fix this little problem, there's going to be another 800,000 within the next 12 months. Well, that's meaningful. It's not just the little problem now. Now there's a paycheck attached to it.
You
Yes.
mean, so if you told them what the goal was, they might actually go after it?
Dangling a
Exactly.
little
Well, and
carrot, like,
I
That is
won't use,
sarcasm. I'm sorry.
yeah, and I won't use names here, but the company that I just sold last week, and I can't make that announcement yet because it's happening next week. I actually, this couple is moving out of the country, and she asked me to do 2 things last year, and I said, you've asked me to maximize the value of your company, and you've asked me to get you out of the country by X date, meaning a sell date. And I said, I can't do both. I said, one of those has to break. So you tell me which one you'd like to break, and I'll focus on the other one, but they can't happen. And I said, if the business is growing, like you said it's growing, I'm going to recommend that you pull it. We're going to let these numbers age and mature a little bit. I think I used the term saute. They just need to mature, and then we're going to put it back on the market. And we did, and there was an extra $4 million to this seller.
Very
And
nice.
that's real money because of a 9-month delay. And it's when people understand those options, they act and think very differently.
Everybody's got
Yeah.
priorities.
That's right.
yes. Yes. Okay, so JT, talk a little bit about blind spots that you see owners or upper or leadership having, maybe when they come to the table to think about selling, or you're going through due diligence. One example I can think of, this is an easy example, but if we're talking about the professional sense, it's easy for owners or leaders to say, we have a great company culture. This is a great place to work. This is really healthy. But then if you're from an outsider perspective looking at the company going, don't know that that's exactly how people actually feel in your company.
That's right. That's
So,
right. And nobody wants their baby to be called ugly, right? It's everyone's blood, sweat, and tears. And you mortgaged the house, you made payroll, all these things.
yeah.
And I would be doing a disservice to my clients. And Tim, I know you're the same way, if we didn't point out what can be fixed. And I don't like to deliver that news. It's not why I get up in the morning. But when I can deliver it and make it better, or show you a roadmap on how to make it better, and I'm not a consultant in that lane. That isn't what I do. I don't come in and make it better. That's Tim's lane. But when you get an owner to look back, and most owners don't look back, they're so focused on the road ahead, the sales, the collections, the top line, the bottom line. When you get them to look back and see what's being created internally, to me, that's where the growth happens. So those blind spots, it's a whole, from your peripheral back, that can be an entire blind spot for people when you're not looking at your internal systems and procedures, which, coming full circle to professionalism, there's a whole internal workings of the business that falls under professionalism. And if you're not focused on any of those details, you're going to rocket to the top and then crash. There's just not a foundation to build on. So I think that's key, is to get people to look back and see how it's actually being built and how strong is our foundation. And then I think that the second blind spot is people don't equate, and I've mentioned this, and I'll use a real example. They don't equate their efforts to a dollar figure. When people call and say they're 2 years out, they're 3 years out, they're 5 years out, and let's say you're a sizable company, you're throwing off a couple $1 million in adjusted EBITDA, and you're working on a multiple of, let's say, 6 or 6.5. And I'm going through their financials and I'll say your margins are off 3%. And they'll say, oh, it's just 3%. It's not a big deal. And I'll say 3% on, let's say, $13 million is significant. Okay. Let's just use $10 million so I can do the math in my head. Okay. $300,000 off on a margin. If that 300,000 were on the bottom line times a multiple of 6, it's $1.8 million of value lost on your $300,000 of margin that wasn't a big deal. So if people equate individual percentages, 1, 2, 3, and 4, to hard dollars upon an exit, you start to look at that P&L very differently. And it's they don't connect the two, and nor should they. They're not thinking about selling, but when it's brought to their attention, they think about the future of their business very differently.
That was a great tidbit. Okay, so Tim, talking kind of about these blind spots, what are companies opening themselves up to beyond the value of the company? Let's say companies that are listening to this, there's an owner listening to this saying, I'm not planning to sell right now, so maybe I don't care if I'm off 3% or my culture isn't exactly right or whatever. What are companies opening themselves up to when they're lacking this professional sense overall?
Wow, that's a good question, Michelle. I mean, there's a lot of answers to that. I think you could go a lot of different ways, but
yeah,
I think just to tack on to what JT was saying, the casualness in which sometimes business owners and leaders overlook small problems that equate to big dollars, or open themselves up for risk can be a big part of that. The biggest one that I see is the misnomer of intermingling of personal funds with company funds, right? So their accountant or their CPA said, yeah, you can write this off and, just slip in some money for your spouse or for your kids or pay for their cell phones or whatever. And that gets, that obviously gets recast and counted back towards the total value in terms of an add back when you value a business, but that can get out of control very quickly. And if you're, I don't want to say bleeding the company dry of cash flow, you're actually stalling growth opportunities. So while you might be quote unquote hiding, whatever expense in the expenses of the business over a period of time, what could you have done with that money if you had left it in the business? Trucks, people, equipment, training, new market penetration, business development activities. It doesn't take long for that to add up. And to me, it's not the cost of what you're bearing, it's the opportunity cost associated with what you could have been doing all along with that money.
Yeah.
Not sure if that was the answer you were looking for, but
it was also the answer. So also talk about the role that this professionalism sense can have, how it can impact on social media, or how it can impact how you could lose your professional sense within your community pretty quickly from some outward facing things, social media being an example, I suppose.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because you can use it, as a way of really promoting your business and your brand awareness and reaching a lot of people very quickly, but your customers can also use it against you.
Yep.
So if you slip up, I mean, that whole thing about, taking a lifetime to build a brand or a positive impression or reputation, but you can ruin it in a matter of minutes is I mean, it's very true today. People can blast you pretty quickly when you slip up, and even when you may think you don't know that you slipped up.
And from a marketing perspective, consumers are going to look at the negative reviews before they're looking at the positive ones. They're going to scroll through and see the 1-star reviews and read those over reading the 5-star reviews if there's too many of them. So that is something to really think about and care about as you're building your business. So
Yeah, and to that point,
ahead.
to the Michelle, one of the things that I've learned or gained an appreciation for recently, not just as a consultant, but as a consumer too, I do the same thing. I'll look at somebody, maybe not that has 1 star or no stars, but maybe one that's got 2 or 3. And what I'm
Yep.
looking for and what people are saying is they're looking at the credibility of that feedback. It's not
Yep.
just that people either want to praise you or ruin you
Yes.
online, but they want to really educate future consumers of that product or service with some real information. Hey, it was a great whatever that I bought, but here were the things that I didn't like about it. To me, that's a credible review. But if they're doing that more often in a professional way
Yep.
about your business, that's good stuff. Like, thank them for that feedback and then do something to correct the things that they didn't like about that experience with your business.
Yes. And think about the consistency of those comments. Is everybody commenting on communication? Do you have 3 different reviews recently about people commenting about they did a great job, but they didn't communicate a ton? Use that, just like Tim said, as a great example of something maybe to work on in your professional sense.
Michelle, we were hired recently to engage in some due diligence for a buyer. So we were on the buy side now of this transaction, and they wanted us specifically to contact and reach out to a sampling of this target company's previous customers. And the reason for that is because of what they thought was a large number of negative reviews online. So we were asked to reach out to a sampling of 100 of their customers. The more feedback we started getting, the more they wanted us to call. We ended up reaching out to, I think it was something like 300 of their previous completed projects. And the feedback was consistent. Yeah, hey, work was great. People were nice. Price was fair. But I had this issue, like they wouldn't return phone calls on time, or it wasn't that they were being rude, it was that. So the sale ended up going through. It was a good thing, but there's a lot to be learned there from the online review thing.
Okay, to wrap this up, and I feel like this is going a little bit of a different direction, but it is a topic that was brought up at the beginning, and we talked about technology. I think it was JT that mentioned technology and restoration. It's come such a long way, and it really, if you embrace it right, can really help with this professional sense and connecting with the customers and not missing those phone calls and making sure they understand when people are going to be there and the scheduling and all of that. Like, technology can take us such a long way at this point. So, Tim, I guess I'll start with you on this one. How far have you seen technology bring the ability for restoration companies to have this amazing professional sense to their customers?
A long way, only because it's an outward expression of that professionalism. It's expected. It's become an expected norm in society. If you don't have an app, a text communication tool, an automated scheduling platform, a 3D imaging camera, the list goes on. You could just go on and on. But if you don't have those things, people view you as old, antiquated, not worthy, or not keeping up with the times, unprofessional.
Yeah.
So put it that way.
JT, anything you want to add?
I really can't add to that. It's I'll just say that gone are the days, and I think the recession of 8, 9, and 10 did that. Gone are the days where we had X amount in the checkbook, we must be doing fine, almost like the old inventory levels. If it's above this red line in the box, we're good. And those are just gone. Now job costing is such a big deal, and there are companies who run individual P&Ls on every job, to track specific performance. Not that that's the norm for smaller companies, but it's got to be used, or you're really just feeling your way down the hallway in the dark, and that's an uncomfortable place to be.
Yes, perfect. Okay, anything that either of you want to add to this professional sense kind of conversation before we wrap it up? I will give a quick teaser when we're done of what we're talking about next. I think the next episode is going to be a very heavy hitter that people are going to be interested in tuning into all by itself. So anything else you want to add on this professional sense conversation first?
Don't take it for granted. If you think your baby's ugly, it probably is. So go do something about it.
Well, I won't lob in a comment after that one. Nice job, Tim.
I love it. If you think your baby's ugly. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. The next conversation we're having is on M&A and PE in the marketplace. So it's going to be a big conversation that we're about to have. And again, if you have any questions for Tim or JT as we go, we would love to answer questions from restorers during some of this series as much as we can. So feel free to shoot me an email, which is Michelle@cnrmagazine.com. We'll put emails at the bottom here so everybody, you can see them. But feel free to reach out to us or comment at the bottom of these posts on social or whatever it may be. We're all easy to find and easy to track down in the industry. So if you have questions, please engage with us. We'd love to kind of answer them on a future video. See you soon.